Welcome to Living Fully. Each episode is a chance to talk about mental health in a way that's simple, honest, and helpful. We'll share stories, tips, and tools to help you feel supported and feel your best. I'm your host, Catherine Hertig. Starting counseling can feel intimidating, especially if you're not sure what to expect. Today, we're answering some of the most common questions people have about counseling. I'm joined by Jelena Radan, a psychologist, and Laura McNeil, a social worker with Calgary Counselling Centre in Counselling, Alberta. And they break down some of the myths and misconceptions around counseling. Yes, today we've got a couple of new guests on the podcast. We've got Jelena Radan, a psychologist, and Laura McNeil, a social worker with Calgary Counselling Centre. Thank you so much for chatting with me today, guys.
Thanks for having us.
So brand new to the podcast. Jelena, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I actually did my residency at Calgary Counselling Centre back in 2019. So that was quite a while ago. But then I came back in 2023 and it's been fantastic. Diverse clients and diverse client concerns. It's amazing to work with all the clients that we offer services to.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm a recent grad, got my master's of social work, graduated in 2025, and completed my internship here at the center, and then have moved into a staff position. So I really enjoy working in this space and the opportunity that the center provides in being able to reach a very diverse population and getting to meet and interact and work alongside kind of all walks of life has been very, very just a lovely experience. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. So today we are breaking down what happens in counseling, answering some common questions, maybe dispelling some myths, that kind of thing. Yeah. So I think, we've all kind of seen counseling and therapy depicted on TV and movies, and people might have, an idea of what it is like. For someone who's never been to counseling before, what have you heard? What do people think it's going to be like versus, what it is in reality?
So a common misconception about therapy is that the client will come in and they will lay down on a couch and talk to the therapist about their childhood and their feelings, and that the therapist will actually be the one that fixes their problems for them.
Yeah.
But in reality, at Calgary Counselling Centre, we don't have couches. We have chairs. And although they're a little bit on the uncomfortable side compared to couches, they actually may be more conducive to continuing conversations, which is really what therapy is all about.
Those conversations?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So the therapist, strives to create this relationship of trust, safety, where the client will hopefully be able to open up about their experiences. Also, sometimes clients may be concerned about being judged in counseling, but then that also goes back to that relationship. So hopefully they won't hold back in order to get the support that they want if the counselor, offers that empathy, that space of understanding.
What does a first counseling session actually look like?
So the initial counseling session is quite structured. So the therapist first reviews the consent form with the client, and the client is able to ask any questions that they may have. Specifically, the counselor talks about feedback-informed treatment that we use at Calgary Counselling Centre, about the limits to confidentiality, as well as the fact that the client can withdraw from services at any point in time. So subsequently, the therapist will talk about the outcome questionnaire, which is a 45-item questionnaire that they complete prior to the initial session.
The client completes that?
Yeah, that they complete prior to that session. So it allows the therapist to get an understanding of their level of stress when they're coming to counseling and to gauge how counseling is going between sessions as well as throughout the course of counseling. It's also important to note that in regards to consent, it doesn't just start and end when that consent form is signed by the therapist and the client.
Yeah, that term of consent, what is a client consenting to?
So the client is consenting to the process of counseling, like what it looks like. So how we work at Calgary Counselling Centre, the fact that, we do consult with experts within the field. So they are aware of that. We do have, group supervision where we get feedback, and that is considered best practice within the field of psychology. Also, if the client has had previous counseling experience within that first session, the therapist will likely ask, what worked in previous counseling, what didn't work so well, in order to tailor their approach to the client.
Yeah.
Yeah. And lastly, at Calgary Counselling Centre, we have the session rating scale, which is part of the feedback-informed treatment at the end of each session. So the client gets this 10-item scale, giving them the opportunity to provide their feedback on how the session went, as well as what their experience is of the relationship between themselves and the counselor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that first session, there's a lot of logistics and kind of just setting the stage for what it's going to be like.
Yeah.
Yeah. And does someone have to be kind of in crisis to go to counseling? Is that kind of the best thing to do? Or can you go if things are just feeling off and you're not really sure what's going on?
Yeah, I think that's another common misconception when it comes to counseling, is that maybe you do have to be in crisis, but you really don't need to be. I know that at the center, I've heard counselors and people kind of use the car maintenance metaphor, right?
Yeah.
Where, you typically don't wait until your engine completely fails and you're on the side of the road, right? You want to, if you notice a sound or an engine light goes off, or just the regular maintenance, right, of coming and making sure things are okay. So the same goes with counseling. So if things are feeling off, or there's alarm bells ringing for you, it can be really helpful to get curious about what feeling off means for you, right? Mm-hmm. So that could be is it showing up in irritability, or feeling a lack of connection, or just kind of lots of extra thoughts kind of happening. And so that exploration can actually create a lot of clarity before things get bigger or heavier. And it can also just be helpful to come into counseling and potentially build some coping strategies or tools when times are feeling a little bit more calm.
For sure.
Opposed to when things get really kind of, in that crisis mode of feeling really big and heavy. So
that's what I found the most helpful when I've done counseling, is building up those tools. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And at a place where it's kind of feels manageable to actually practice them as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And like you said, that kind of, Jelena, that misconception, it's not just a counselor fixing things. In my experience, it's been someone who helps kind of reveal the tools you have to deal with these things on your own.
Yeah,
exactly. And we also know that, when clients are the ones who are able to make that decision, there will be greater follow through because they have that agency themselves. So, yeah.
Now, is counseling, is it mostly talking about, you touched on this a little bit, is it talking about your past and your childhood and what all that meant? Or do you focus on the present and what's happening?
Yeah, I think counseling isn't just about talking about the past. Again, I think that kind of goes in line with Jelena was saying of that idea we have that you're sitting on a couch with this professional person, right? But it can be helpful to explore someone's history and understand maybe patterns or relationships, or where some certain beliefs were developed. But specifically at Calgary Counselling, we do take a change-oriented approach as well. So that wants to focus on your work now, what's happening for you right now, and where do you want to go, and how can we kind of work together to get you to that place?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I guess it's so unique. It's normal for people to kind of make, kind of blanket stereotypes of something to better understand it, but it's just so dependent on the individual and what they're going through, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've had clients say that that's, not maybe something that they want to explore, and others that are really interested in maybe pinpointing some of those patterns. Yeah. And again, it goes back to, what does the client want? What's going to be most helpful and meaningful for them through this process?
Yeah. And so how does the process and the conversation work? Are you guys as counselors kind of drawing out conversation topics Does the client lead? Like, I know for myself, sometimes I've gone into counseling sessions and been like, I don't know what to talk about today.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that's super common. I think sometimes people come in and they know exactly what they want. And other times they're a bit like, I don't know where to start. This is overwhelming. So I like to think of it's like a little bit of both, right? Where, like Jelena was talking, the first session is quite structured. There's a lot to kind of get through in that way, right? But kind of after that process, as a counselor, we're coming in with a bit of an idea or like a plan, right? Based on like previous conversations that we've had and where the client wants to go. And then we also get to use that outcome questionnaire again that Jelena had mentioned around. It really provides us with a great kind of snapshot of maybe where somebody's stress is in the past week or since the last session.
Right.
And so we can use that to maybe highlight what might need to be kind of talked about or bring attention to.
Can you maybe give us an example of that, like something on the outcome questionnaire that might not maybe raise a red flag, but could be something that might spur a conversation?
Yeah, I think a common one, and it's kind of goes just to basic needs that I kind of look for, is there's a question that asks about your sleep and how you've been sleeping, right? Yeah. So kind of even looking at how is a person sleeping right now, right? And if they are really struggling with that, well, okay, how is that impacting how you're showing up every day in your life, right? So that can be just like a little pinpoint we can pull from that can generate a bit more of a conversation, as well as maybe helping the client find some strategies around what could help with that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I think a concern that, is really common for people around counseling is the cost. In private practice, I think it can be pretty expensive and that might not be sustainable for someone. Mm-hmm. So how does counseling usually work financially? I guess we can, we'll speak to how it is at Calgary Counseling Centre and Counselling Alberta. But yeah, and then what kind of options are there for people if money is tight?
Yeah, so at Calgary Counseling, we offer a sliding fee scale, which allows clients to pay, what they can afford. And then we also have a broader reach in terms of offering our services to individuals that live outside of Calgary, but within Alberta as well. So it's amazing.
Yeah. And so we're saying counseling's not exactly telling a client what to do. How would you kind of describe that? Because I think more often than not, people are coming in because they want to make a change. Mm-hmm. So how do you kind of guide that process?
Yeah. So again, I think there's that maybe a misconception around that we will give advice or kind of tell you what to do. But yeah, counseling isn't really about that. And I think it would actually probably be pretty inappropriate if I was telling somebody how to live their life. Yeah. But it's more about, again, like working together to understand what's going on for this person. What are the patterns at play? And what values matter to them most, and how we can kind of allow them to get to a place where they can maybe make change that aligns with those values. So yeah, our role isn't to kind of hand out questions. We really strive to just ask thoughtful questions, maybe provide like different perspectives, and really help client to try to uncover what feels important to them. And Jelena mentioned before that really if people are able to kind of get to decisions that they've made themselves that align again with what matters to them and their values, that they're more likely to kind of stick to those, opposed to if somebody's just kind of offering some outsourced information that they should do. Yeah.
We're not a client's friend. We are there we're kind of like that supporting character.
Okay.
Yeah, to kind of help them, to support them throughout, their struggles and even support them in their wins and, be there along the way.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And how do you guys go about laying out those boundaries or reinforcing them when you need to?
I think a part of that is in that kind of first session when you're going through the consent for counseling form, a bit of describing exactly what Jelena just did there around like, what is my role and what is your role as a person entering counseling, right? So one of the kind of easiest boundaries that are kind of coming to mind is not doing any sort of counseling through email at all, right? So when those kind of maybe boundaries get like pushed slightly. It's kind of just providing that gentle reminder of like, hey, this is a protection for, first of all, your privacy, but also emails, texts, everything like that can get so misconstrued. And I want to make sure that, our messages are getting across in a kind way. But that's just kind of one boundary that's coming to mind. But yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, another boundary that came to mind was about seeing our clients in public and what that's like. So we don't acknowledge the client unless they choose to acknowledge us. And that is sometimes discussed within therapy to see, this might happen. How would you like to proceed with this? And even then, if they do acknowledge us and we talk and they have somebody with them, or even if they're alone, we would not enter into a conversation about anything related to the therapy itself. Yeah.
And I really liked how you described that we're not their friend, right? We are that kind of
like an objective party.
Yes. Yeah.
And we've talked about this in the podcast a bit before, but it's always good to get another perspective and kind of, frame around it. How do you know if counseling is actually helping? Because it's, I would think it would be like subjective's not the word, but it's like, it's not like a physical ailment where it's like, I have a headache, I take this pill, my headache is gone. It's more conceptual, I guess, is the term. Anyway, how do you guys know that the counseling's working?
Well, I mean, it is natural for things to feel uncomfortable at first, especially for those people that have not done counseling in the past, so they don't have those previous experiences to fall back on. But, from the first session, as I talked about earlier, the therapist really tries to do what they can to make the client comfortable, to make them recognize that it is a judgment-free environment in order to help them to open up. Also, in terms of like if counseling is helping, change, it's a process. It's not like you come to 1 or 2 sessions and things are completely great again. Yeah. Right? So it does take time. So it's not an immediate gratification situation, I guess. And just going back to that feedback-informed treatment, so the outcome questionnaire, the OQ, does allow us to see whether counseling is making a difference, whether there is change that is happening. So it's like a check on the client's mental health vital signs. And then also the rating scale. Like I mentioned earlier, it lets the client let us know what is working, what isn't working. Do we need to pivot? Do we need to integrate something different? Is there another modality that we can use? Would they be a good fit for a group at this point? So there's different options that we can draw on as well.
Yeah. So for individual counseling, like just one person coming in, what are some common reasons, like you two specifically, that like, why do people come in for counseling?
Yeah, there's all kinds of reasons that we kind of see. The research that we have here at the center shows us that the top reasons that people seek support like include relationship challenges, child behavior problems, separation or divorce, and anxiety and depression. And thinking about it even from what I see, it really does kind of fit the people that I kind of see in the counseling room. And when you think about it, relationships are really central to how we experience life. So when that's really strained, it shows up in all aspects.
For sure.
And even like anxiety and depression, they can show up in many different ways where, sometimes it's just like overwhelming thoughts. Maybe it's like low mood, or again, just kind of feeling like things just aren't really right anymore for them. But it's really important to know that there is like no right or wrong reason to come to counseling either. Yeah. If there's something that's affecting your well-being or like how you're showing up and you're really noticing that, then that's a good enough reason to just reach out as well.
For couples that come into counseling, for the most part, is it when things are going pretty bad and, they're nearing the end of the relationship? Is it kind of a range? Like, what do you see?
Well, typically with couples, most couples do come to counseling as like a last-ditch effort to save their relationship.
Yeah.
Not sure how to say that a bit more pleasantly, but it's kind of like, we'll try this, and if it doesn't stick, then it's done. However, you don't need to be at the brink of breaking up to come to counseling. It's actually advised that couples come much earlier when the issues in the relationship, aren't as pronounced.
Yeah.
As therapists, we can open channels of communication and even, support the couple to identify issues that may be simmering underneath the surface.
I came to counseling a couple of times with, my now husband. Things were really good, but there was just like we needed tweaks and kind of enhancements to the way we communicate. And so I found that really helpful. And have you encountered times where with a couple that you're working with, where kind of one person is more invested in the process than the other?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is something that...
Is it pretty common?
Common, yes.
Yeah.
As we can hear Laura. Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to what the therapist is trying to do. They try to create, space for each partner's voice so that they can, have that opportunity to talk about their experience in their relationship and what issues they believe are important to address. At times we'll interject as therapists to make sure that each person is heard. But yeah, it can be pretty challenging when one person is, hesitant or unsure about the process. In my own work with couples, sometimes I may transition to at least one individual session with each of them just to get more context and understanding of how they see their relationship and what they think needs to change, and then potentially resume the couples counseling afterwards. Yeah.
Okay. How about you, Laura?
Yeah, I think that was really well described, but I think that there's a way as well to, that the space kind of created in a couple session is to offer the space and time for kind of each person to explore what's happening for them as well. But then also being able to pair that with, there is the option for individual counseling if that's maybe what is needed at that time, right? And you can kind of bounce a little bit between that and couples work, depending on what kind of feels best for the couple at that time.
And how about for kids? I'm sure that looks really different. I don't imagine a 5-year-old is just going to sit in a chair and talk to you for an hour.
If only.
Yeah.
That would be something. So with children, we work, of course, to establish a relationship of trust.
Yeah.
When we see kids, and we do this through play therapy.
Okay.
So we know that when children, may struggle to express how they're feeling, they may be more likely to open up when they are doing an activity that is of interest to them, like maybe drawing, coloring, or, playing Lego. And through this shared activity, the therapist can, start to develop that relationship and just get to know the child a little bit more and, what may be going on for them. So it just requires time to build that relationship, though.
Is that a bit more challenging than working with an adult because they can tell you right out, what's going on? Are you interpreting what's going on with the kid through the play? Is it a bit more challenging?
Yeah, I think it at times can be because that kind of maybe language or being able to identify what emotion they're feeling, right? That's all skills that we kind of have to learn as we grow. So yeah, it can be more challenging, but it can be also kind of fun to be able to play around. But yeah, there is that through play, you can kind of interpret a little bit of what they're saying or meaning, but it also gives a great opportunity to even act out things in real life. Hey, I saw you got really frustrated there. What was happening? Or maybe frustrated is the wrong word, right? But it's what was kind of happening and how can we kind of identify that? And maybe let's just practice the skill, but in a really fun way opposed to more structured like we'd see in adult counseling. Yeah.
And are parents in on all these sessions or?
Yeah, it's it can be a little bit of both. And again, we work with the family and the parents in what they would kind of prefer, what they'd like to see, but then also recognizing that the child needs to feel comfortable as well. So sometimes that can look like, mom or dad or the parents being in the session with us. And other times it might be that they're not there, right? It can also be a progression. It can be a conversation that's ongoing where, the first maybe couple sessions, parents are in the room and then the child feels a little bit more comfortable and safe. And then we can kind of have more of a solo session. But yeah, the other idea too is that we try to kind of work with the whole family, right? So sometimes that might mean counseling for the child, for the parents, a combination of then family counseling as well. Because I think there's, a bit of, I never, I guess, want it to seem like there's one person that's kind of a problem or that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And I often think when it comes to primarily children too, is that behavior changes are really a form of communication as well, right?
Yeah.
They're trying to communicate something. So we have to kind of work to unearth that a little bit, try to figure out what's happening. And often that does involve kind of the whole family unit, right? So it's kind of looking at that family system as a whole, opposed to just more of that real individual work when it comes to kids.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Let's talk about confidentiality and privacy in counseling, kind of overall, but like I'm thinking of a couple scenarios in particular, like if you're working with a teen, like obviously they're technically still a minor and, like their parents are responsible for them. But I would assume these counseling conversations, they'd want them to remain private. And yeah, just are there any situations when you're working with someone but you need to tell someone what's going on? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in terms of confidentiality, even like through the consent process for every client that we work with, not just with teens, we do talk about the limits to confidentiality. So the therapist, they may need to breach confidentiality when safety concerns arise. So if there's like reasonable suspicion of child abuse or neglect to a dependent, if the client were to communicate a threat of bodily injury to themselves or to others, or if the client is suicidal. More specifically, though, to answer your question, with teens, there is usually like a conversation that is had around confidentiality with the parents. So, of course, the safety concerns are non-negotiable.
Yeah.
But then also, like, what do the parents want to know? Like things like, drinking, drugs, self-harm.
Yeah.
So we try to create that space where we can come to like a mutual agreement between the parents and the teen about, what other things might be disclosed and why, so that there is understanding and everybody's on the same page.
And how do you kind of build that relationship with a teen so they feel they can open up to you and know like you're not going to divulge everything to their parents?
So that also is a conversation that is had at the beginning of counseling, and also discussed with the parents that there needs to be a level of like confidentiality there where the teen is able to open up, and that everything is not just going to be disclosed to the parents. So typically there could be an agreement that maybe themes of the sessions are disclosed if that is okay with the teen and with the parent. Yeah, not specifics, unless there is like safety concerns, for example. Yeah.
We touched on this a bit, but what do you guys see as some misconceptions about counseling that might stop people from reaching out for help?
When I think about this question, and I feel like I'm a little bit biased when I think about it. So I kind of like reached out to some friends as well that was like, what are the reasons, that you have stopped?
Collecting data, I like it.
Yeah. Research oriented. The biggest theme, I guess, that came up was fear of being judged, fear of being told like what they should do, that like advice almost kind of thing again. Or that thought of like, if I have to go to therapy, does that mean I'm not actually capable of handling these things on my own, which is like a very scary thought to have. And the other one was like a vulnerability piece of like sitting down with a stranger.
Oh, totally.
Right?
Yeah.
Sharing really personal, difficult experiences. Like that's a big step for anybody. And so, I found that to be like a good reminder for me as well as being the counselor in the room, is that this is a huge step for anybody, is reaching out and coming in and meeting us and sitting down with us.
Totally.
I think there's also an idea that their struggles aren't bad enough, like quote unquote there, or that counseling maybe won't like make a difference. I know Jelena and I kind of talked about how different communities, whether it's like cultural, generational, or like gender related, there can be an idea that sharing or feeling your emotions is like a sign of weakness and that you just need to push through. So yeah, I think.
And those are kind of really hard to break through and get it.
Like that stigma attached to therapy, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So those are, really, I think, common, but they're really big, right? So it's like a reminder,
really valid. Yeah.
Valid. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Valid. Yes. But yeah, just like a reminder too, in that is that like counseling is really collaborative and you get to move at your own pace. If you don't want to talk about anything you're not ready to, we are not going to force you to go down any road that's going to, be more harmful or anyway. So, it's really just about like willing to understand yourself and maybe trying to create change if that is something that you're wanting to do.
And that kind of reminds me of another question I have, I guess, around time commitment or limitations. Like I think, one concern that I've heard around our organization in particular that isn't true is that we have a limited number of sessions. Like you can only have like 2 or 3. So can you talk about that? And then also like how long would someone typically come for? How many sessions to see a benefit? Are we talking years, weeks, months kind of thing? Like what's typical?
So typically with using the feedback-informed treatment and the outcome questionnaire specifically, clients usually see change between 5 and 8 sessions or so. But then again, we also have to keep it in context about like what is the presenting concern, the level of severity, that sort of thing. So it could be less than 5, could be more than 8. There is no set number of sessions. And because we are change-oriented, as Laura has talked about, very goal-oriented as well, we are looking at that progress each session and across the sessions too.
I have also to just add on that, heard, that idea of through all of these measures that we have, if counseling is showing that it is helpful and working, that counseling can continue, right? And it's not like this needs to end kind of thing either, but it's, if it isn't working, then also maybe there's another resource or something else that's kind of needed as well too. But,
and that definitely leads me to my next question. Like if someone tries counseling and they don't feel like it's working or that the fit with the counselor isn't right, what options do they have there?
So if they feel that the counseling isn't making much of a difference, in regards to that, the therapist can open up a conversation about that with the client, can consult with a colleague or with their own supervisor, can explore suitability for a group at that point.
So there's adjustments you can make.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
there is adjustments. If the client finds that the fit with the counselor isn't right for them for whatever reason, then they can bring this up to their current therapist if they choose to. Again, it's okay if the fit doesn't feel right. Sometimes that is the case. It's not always going to be the right fit.
I think that's important to talk about because, like you guys have said, it's a relationship, and you're not going to be best friends with everybody. So it's not unusual for you to not quite click with a counselor. And I think some people, they give counseling a try. That fit isn't there the first time, so they kind of dismiss the whole process, when if that fit was there with someone else, it might have led to a better result.
Yeah, and then they can, so as I mentioned, them bring that up to their counselor just to get an understanding of for the counselor to understand what are their preferences. Can we accommodate those preferences for what they're looking for within a counselor? And if some clients may not be comfortable having that conversation with their current therapist. So in that case, at Calgary Counselling, we are totally fine if the client wants to contact our intake team to discuss being reassigned or transferred to a different counselor, and they will get that support there.
For sure, because that conversation
can be awkward.
Totally.
Sometimes, yeah.
Last question, guys. So for someone who's listening, who's thinking about counseling, still a little bit unsure, what would you want them to know?
Yeah, someone's listening and is still unsure. I think I'd want them to know that, you're not walking into a room with somebody who has it all figured out and is analyzing you. You're sitting down with just another human. And yes, we do have training, but we're still human at the end of the day. And you don't have to perform. There's no right words that you can kind of say. It's just, you don't even really have to know maybe what's wrong. Like, you can just start with that. And that's something that we can kind of collaboratively work together to figure out what that means for you and where you want to go. Yeah. So counseling is kind of, like you said, more of a relationship and a conversation as well. And even like logistically and practically speaking, we've talked a lot about how, like finances are difficult. A lot of things are expensive right now in this world. And it's really lovely that at Calgary Counselling, we do offer that sliding scale. So hopefully that takes away one of those barriers for accessing services here, and that is available like across Alberta through our Counselling Alberta program as well. So and our intakes are very user-friendly too. Like, you can just hop online and do that or make a phone call and you'll talk to some lovely people. But what do you have anything you'd like to add or what people should know?
I think you said it well. You don't have to include that last part.
Amazing. Jelena, Laura, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I think that you've definitely eased a lot of people's minds about this process.
Yeah, hope so. Yeah, thanks for having us. Yeah.
You've been listening to Living Fully, a Calgary Counselling Centre podcast. Thank you for tuning in. This episode was produced by Nick Here, Louisa Campos, Jenna Forbes, and by me, Catherine Hertig. A special thanks to Jelena Radan and Laura McNeil. Tune in to our next episode on June 2nd. We'll be talking about how to cope when the world feels overwhelming, from constant bad news and political division to economic uncertainty and climate concerns.
Yeah, I think the exposure to bad news all the time and that sense of powerlessness means that people don't feel like they're able to make a meaningful difference. And we know that having a purpose, having a sense of agency, having a sense of being able to move forward is really, really beneficial to people in general.
To stay up to date on our latest episodes, be sure to subscribe. We're available in your favorite podcast app. Living Fully is a production of Calgary Counselling Centre and recorded in Calgary on Treaty 7 territory. Living Fully podcast is not a substitute or alternative for professional care or treatment. Calgary Counselling Centre and Counselling Alberta provide effective counselling to anyone in Alberta with no waitlist and no financial barriers. Find us online at calgarycounselling.com and counsellingalberta.com. For help across Canada and the United States, call 211. If you are outside of Canada and the US, seek help from your general medical practitioner.